connection, conversation. These are some of the things that motivate artists to create. It is their ability to see challenges in the world as opportunities to do something about those challenges. But who are these artists? How do their unique identities shape the work that they create? And how, in return, does the work that they create shape the communities that they are a part of?
So the Say Their Names piece, the idea for that started in the summer when a lot of the social justice protests were taking place. And the sculpture building where I work is on Edgewood Avenue, and it sits on a corridor between the Capitol and the MLK Center. And there were a lot of marchers and protesters that went up and down there. And at the time we had a broken window, and someone just wrote Black Lives Matter on the piece of wood. And I thought, you know, this building is located in an area that's historically important to African American history of Atlanta. It's on this corridor between the Capitol. And, you know, maybe we can say something in support of people who are seeking social justice. So that's where the idea for the piece came from. I don't really see that piece as so much a creation of mine, but a creation of the moment, right? Because it's just public information. It's put up in a place that was active in the summer. My hope was that people would see it as a show of support just from me as an artist, really. I mean, I wanted it to be only visible at night because it is in many ways a memorial to all of those people and many others who've died in unfortunate circumstances. But it also speaks to the unseen nature of so many instances where people are killed by authority or suffer a social injustice.
Well, the piece that I'm sharing with you is called Quién Soy, and it's a question, and it translates to who am I? And I think that that title sums up the self-portraiture that I do, because I want to know who I am. And like, I feel like in this whole journey of belonging, I felt like I had to decide the one thing that I was. I was either going to be Peruvian or American. You know, like I had to decide. And especially growing up in the South, we are given so many binaries of like black and white, one thing or the other. And there's no in-between options. And feeling like I was always this in-between of everything, I wanted to capture the different sides of me, the different ways that I can look. It feels really intense because there's so much going on. So, but it's all one person, and it's carrying so many different emotions. Like here, I'm smiling. I was just trying to accept it, trying to love it, trying to love everything that makes me different, from the happy moments to the dark moments to the moments where I feel out of control.
Am I growing into myself or further into myself? Am I becoming the person who I should be, or am I staying who I've always been? As my roots dive further within, solidifying my stability, my branches are reaching out, reaching for the newness and light to inspire growth. Am I growing from my past, or am I just hiding behind it? I hold on to the ghosts of my past. Why do I think this shields me from the present? Do you ever think about the way the tree grows? The cambium is the sweet spot, from which the bark grows outwards, leaving the old cracked facade to fall and fertilize the soil. Where in the same spot the trunk grows inward, expanding around the oldest part of the tree, the core. There's something so deeply beautiful about this spot of simultaneous growth. It feels so applicable. I guess I'm really growing into myself while growing further into myself. In both ways, at the same time, taking inspiration from the tree. This is the cambium of the self. I just read a personal poem inspired off of the sculpture, The Campion of the Self. And I named it that because one day I was out in my backyard looking at a tree and was wondering, oh, so the oldest part of the tree trunk is in the center, but yet the oldest part of the bark is on the outside. And I was wondering where that space of mutual growth happened, and I did some research and I found that there's a layer of the tree called the cambium that is the layer of simultaneous growth where the bark grows outward and the trunk grows inward. And that piece is about growing into yourself and growing into adulthood and trying to figure out, kind of your place in life. And it is a lady sitting in a tree holding a mask that's see-through, and it's all about growing into yourself as going into your core, growing into who you are, and growing into yourself as in growing outward and growing into the person that you're becoming, and how it's a spot of simultaneous growth constantly.
The painting behind me here is called Why. And I use a model for this painting. And in it, I was exploring, and I wanted the viewer to, when they hear the title, Why, I want them to kind of say, well, why is he looking towards the heavens? What is it? So here is a young man who's looking towards the heaven with the look on his face like, why are we still dealing with the same stuff we've been dealing with for centuries? We're dealing with the same thing in this place at this time. Why is it happening now? And what can we do to keep it from happening again? And it keeps happening over and over again. Will our children still be dealing with the same thing another 100 years from now? So now's the time for us to try to get this thing right. And so that's what this piece is all about. It's just why. And I want the viewer to look at this piece and kind of ask that question for themselves and say, why is this going on? And if I get enough people to do that, maybe we can come up with some real answers to why it's going on. Maybe we can figure out how to correct it.
It's funny because I just said that my work isn't a response, right? But the pull-up sessions were a response, but in a way that with COVID and social distancing and all of that stuff that was going on in March, I personally realized that how important it is to connect. Right? I realized how important it was, how important physical touch meant to me. And at the time when everything was going nuts, everything was going crazy, we didn't know what the next time we'd be able to hug a loved one, right? We didn't know the next time we'd be able to share space with our friends. When the pull-up sessions came to me, it was out of an absolute desire to connect with people. I recognized that there were people who were doing really well with social distancing. I was one of those people. I was like, yo, this is a perfect time for me to reflect, for me to slow down. Like, life had been going nuts prior to it, and I was just like feeling overwhelmed, and this gave me a chance to breathe. So I was thankful. There were others who were not doing so well because maybe they were in quarantine or social distancing by themselves. And in an effort to celebrate with those who felt okay, and in an effort to lift up those who weren't doing so well, the pull-up sessions, right? I invited, people every week, every Wednesday to come to my home to take portraits or to make portraits outside. We would still keep 6 feet, and it was a beautiful experience. There was no cost because it wasn't about that. It wasn't about money. This is not a time for me to make money when everybody's trying to figure out they're being laid off and they're trying to figure out how they're gonna feed their family and stuff like that. So, when Jamal and his son Taj came to my home, Jamal pulled up in this beautiful old school, and I remember thinking like, yo, we're about to make something really beautiful here, right? We're about to make some like real classic. Jamal was very mindful about wearing his mask, but at one point I was like, yo, I'm gonna stand back I'll keep my distance from you, but I want you to look proud, and I want you to, you know, like show me how you're feeling right now, right? And he was like, yo, I got my son with me. And the black and white, you know, immortalized it. It took away the option of color, right? Because then when you see the colors, you're thinking, oh, okay, well, it just informs it a little differently. But when it's devoid of that color, you just get to see the emotion. Like, and that's the only thing you get to see, right? And how beautiful is it that we can still make something that feels like this picture does. If we're not connecting, what are we here for?
The concept for this piece happened before we knew what COVID was. And when I had been talking to Coke about painting this mural, like right before the pandemic jumped off. I didn't get to paint it until, like almost December or so. And by then, the concept took on a new meaning because we spent like a year apart, and by the time people in the city start coming back together for games and everything, the sort of the process of reintroducing the hug to people, or how are we going to interact with each other post-pandemic. So this piece was sort of like a reintroduction to giving people dap, the greet. So I wanted this to be a piece where people came together again as a reminder of, what sports does is bring people together to root for or against a team, and join in for the moment of camaraderie to root for your team. We've been through 4 years of division, a lot of partisan politic and really just kind of deep-seated race issues has really been brought to the surface because of what's been going on politically. So I feel like us as Americans to start to come together again, because one thing we all learned during these last 4 years, but especially the last year with this pandemic, is that our country ain't necessarily conflict proof. And I feel like now is the time to really start to figure out how to come together as one country and put a lot of things that we've, that's happened in the past, confront it, acknowledge it, you know what I'm saying? Deal with it. We got to deal with our issues of the past. And until that happens, we really can't move forward, and we have to move forward.